to give you all an outsider's view into WebRTC, not specifically explain WebRTC because I know you all know way more than I possibly do. But it's more about, like I think Dan already covered a lot of things that I'm going to say, but basically how difficult it is to, sometimes follow the jargon and, you tend to get lost. So this is what we're going to be covering today. I'll give you a quick intro into my background. We do a small intuition exercise and maybe build a word cloud. Uh, I'll tell you what the mistakes I've been making right now while I'm trying to learn WebRTC. I'll tell you how I would have liked to be introduced to WebRTC and not the way I was. I'll talk about a couple of challenges, and I, of course, will take your input at most places. And then I'll talk about how I finally did figure out what I'm trying to learn and maybe give a couple of examples into how I would ideally go about it. So, hey folks, I'm Ritvi. I'm a coach at Major League Hacking. I have a lot of obsessions once in a while. So my current obsessions are glass and scuba diving. So if y'all are into any of those, definitely come talk to me. I also have a day job. I work as a developer advocate at Diet. So, I think this is a good place for me to give you a little bit of a story insight as to why I even bothered coming up with this talk, right? So my background is in firmware engineering, and I've done I did like multiple internships with different design studios working on firmware. One of my favorite projects that I love talking about is a smart hookah that we made. Testing was definitely a very dedicated team that we had. But I basically switched gears into dev advocacy because I love being able to, talk about tech that I'm learning, and I am very passionate about being able to teach it. So I ended up at Diet, and I have been trying to create resources for people to learn about Diet, right? But before teaching about something that is leveraging tech below it, I need to be able to explain it to me and hence be able to break it down to, people further. So I just want to take a quick poll. How many of you all have tried to evangelize WebRTC or just, video calling tech? Okay. No one else? None of you have tried to evangelize the product y'all are working on? I know there were a few talks from Membrane. I can bet it's not easy, especially as developers tend to want to use tech to basically make their life easy in terms of not having to learn the tech below it, right? So yeah, before I get started with the mistakes I made, let's do a small intuition exercise, right? So I want you all to scream, right? The first thing that comes to your head, like how when I say apple, you all get an image of apple in your head. The first image that comes into your head when I say WebRTC. Just scream. What's the first image that comes to your head? I don't want opinions. I don't want definitions. Just what's the first thing that comes to your head? Awesome. I think one of my favorite, I'll give you an example of my favorite. So I was doing this with APIs, and one of the people went them taking, doing stuff for their siblings. That was an example of the API intuition exercise. So yeah, what's the first thing that comes to your head when you hear the word WebRTC? Awesome. There we go. No one else? No images when you hear the word WebRTC? Rishit? Video. Awesome. Great. Cool. So this is something that we'll probably, take pictures with later. So I would love for you all to scan the QR code and maybe put in your words that you all thought of when you all heard the word WebRTC. I'm going to give you all exactly 2 minutes on the clock, and then we'll look at the word cloud later when we're done with the PPT to see whether I've been making the right mistakes. Give me a heads up once you all are done. All right, folks, time's up. Y'all can keep entering your answers if you all want to enter it multiple times, but yeah, we'll have a look at it later. All right, so why WebRTC from an outsider's view? I've already given you quite a brief. It is for outsiders, right? You want people to use your tech, especially developers, to leverage the products that you're building upon it. It's nice for them to know what they're using. And, well, the mistakes I'm making, and it is hilarious how difficult it is to get started with something so beautiful. This tech is so great. I mean, I'm at a point where I love reading about it and, using it. But oh man, it was difficult. So 40 minutes, I started working at Diet a couple of months ago, and 40 minutes into trying to learn about WebRTC, these were the words I knew. Did I know what was WebRTC? No. But I knew these words. And 40 minutes later, I was brainstorming a startup idea, which I decided was too competitive. So I dropped it. But WebRTC, when you go to read about it, is basically a bunch of acronyms. Does anyone over here remember the Mozilla definition of WebRTC? Or when was the last time you read the Mozilla definition of WebRTC? It's just a bunch and bunch of, technical jargon and, acronyms. This is what, if I wish someone would have told me this. This is what WebRTC is, right? Yes? Well, I see people like, no, not really. No. But if someone would just tell me this, and this is something that, again, like Dan mentioned, and I completely agree with him, documentation does not have to be, it can start off easy. And that's what we're trying to do at Diet also, basically start off easy documentation. But basically, this is how simple WebRTC is, right? It's a good analogy to start with. Two people trying to communicate directly. And okay, this is WebRTC without the jargon. Let's look into how it works without the jargon, right? When I'm starting off with a new tech, I do not need to know the tech behind it. I can start with something of an analogy, and I can break it down pretty easily, right? So let's continue our park analogy, right? So we started off with what's WebRTC in a park analogy. We said that, okay, two people trying to communicate over a walkie-talkie. How does it work? Well, WebRTC, if we were trying to find each other, we would say something of a signal, right? That, hey, we're in the same park. Then we would want to speak the same language. That is basically ensuring that, we're using the same protocols. And ensure privacy. I did not need to know what NAT and STUN was the first time I was reading the documentation, right? So this is the Mozilla documentation definition. I use the Bionic Reader, which is why the picture's weird, but this is the definition. So I went ahead and I researched better documentation, right? Because I eventually want to create documentation for myself. So this is a documentation. This is a small definition that I found, which is so much better, right? This is just a tad bit simpler, but it makes my life so much easier. Do you all know where this definition is? It's actually on Touch Designer. Touch Designer is actually a designing tool, a node-based designing tool, which a lot of visual artists use. So if you all ever go to a concert and you all see a lot of lighting happening on the stage, all right, so challenges, so that's the Touch Designer definition. It's a simple software that is basically leveraging WebRTC. And they actually bothered to break it down to the point where, okay, I do not need anyone who's reading about the definition to be a video engineer, right? It can be someone who just wants to leverage the tech, right? So this is a simpler definition. So let's talk about challenges in starting with WebRTC, right? I want stories. I know you all are mostly experienced engineers, but what was your first experience, like the first time you all, read the first WebRTC documentation? Anyone? Any story regarding how they started? Yes.
I never used it.
You never used it. Awesome. Anyone else? No stories, Rishad?
Yeah, it was hard. So I came across the Lobster Pioneer. So not Pioneer, so there's a WebRTC for the curious. So that was a nice resource. But yeah, before I found that, it was hard. Like it was the same experience of sort of seeing all these short forms like stun and ice, as you mentioned. But yeah, once I came across that, it became a bit easier.
Awesome. So, like, basically, the point I'm trying to, you have a story as well?
Yeah, I have a story. Like we started. There was the rise and interest of clients in WebRTC, and like we decided we wanted to follow on those leads, and like I had to deep dive into the Big Bang Bunny project and learn everything from the scratch, and try to debug the problems that the clients had. So that's kind of a nightmare. Like 2 months of debugging and watching Big Bang Bunny.
I'm glad that story is such a great segue into this talk. But yeah, So I think another really good takeaway, if especially y'all are here, with products that leverage WebRTC, is how good documentation can be an, natural marketing agent for your product. Anyone else? Especially some of this experienced people. None of y'all had any trouble starting with WebRTC? There you go.
Went the other way around. npm install PureJS. Done.
Great. So basically, that's the story that I'm trying to tell, right? We want people to use Dite in some form, but we can't really explain easily why Dite, right? For that, we need to be able to explain WebRTC. So this is one of the ways I finally got started, and this is again from Touch Designer. So like I said, right, Touch Designer is a node-based application, and they have a simple node that helps you configure WebRTC. You open this node's definition, and that's it. You configure it once, and you have a really good idea about what WebRTC is doing. You're setting a stun server, you research what's stun, you put a username, you put a URL, and you know somewhat what's happening, right? So when you define something this easily and you let people configure, is a really good example of a documentation. I see so many code sandboxes on so many products leveraging WebRTC, and none of them have actually boiled it down to something this simple, right? I'm either exposing a million APIs or sending auth tokens across, but not a single one has kept it this simple, right? All right, first steps into WebRTC. Now, this is more geared towards anyone who's again trying to evangelize their product, which leverages WebRTC. And this is something again that we're trying to do at Dite. We are trying to build basically, instead of just blogs that, hey, which by the way reminds me, Dan really referenced a really nice Dite blog that we've done on similar lines. Basically, don't just talk about the tech, show how you're using it. Again, a simple definition, and it works, right? Another really good example is Dite socket.io. What we've done is basically we've rebuilt socket.io and we're maintaining it actively, and that basically has also a live code sandbox. We also have a device emulator that's doing the same thing, by the way. So in case you all have ever worked with video tech and you all have had, problems with device testing, right? What we've done is basically to help you all leverage WebRTC better and test your devices better. We have an entire, so how do you test audio devices, failing or being connected or disconnected, and we've basically done that. Awesome. So another really good way I found finally started learning about WebRTC was through the community. Anyone, any favorite communities for WebRTC? Yeah, I love Video Dev on Slack. Yes, they're doing a great job putting resources together. Any other favorite communities for folks who like or have been learning WebRTC, or when they are lost, go to search for resources on WebRTC? I'm sorry? Pious. Awesome, yes. Anyone else?
Currently, it's like open space on Software Mentions second floor.
Another really cool resource that I found was community discussion. There's a really cool WebRTC live that happens on YouTube every other week, I believe. And they have some really cool resources. And so, yeah, we want to do the same thing. And we're actually having a discussion party on WebRTC and basically OSS projects and video engineering on Tuesday. So if you all want to join us, we're having that at 7 p.m. On Tuesday. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me, folks. I promised to keep it short and simple. And yeah, if you all have any questions regarding dev evangelism in video tech, I am happy to answer.
Thank you.